The multi-million-dollar deal was seconds from being signed. Then the translator leaned into her microphone, looked directly at the Japanese executive and said, in perfect Japanese, "I know who you are. I've heard your voice on an NSA wiretap." The room in Seoul froze. He was a respected businessman. She was his hired translator. And with one sentence, she exposed him as a lord of the Yakuza. Her name was Anya Petrova. A former signals intelligence analyst for a shadowy NATO affiliate, she now worked freelance in Seoul. His name was Kenji Sato, on paper a venture capitalist from Osaka. But Anya had spent 3 years listening to the ghost in the machine, a Yakuza lieutenant known only as the Architect. And his voice was now sitting across the table. This is how a single translator, armed with a secret and a microphone, brought down an empire. But in that silent conference room with his bodyguards, hands moving toward their jackets, the only question was, would she survive the next 60 seconds? 3 months earlier, Anya Petrova was sitting in a soundproof booth in Tallinn, Estonia, headphones on, listening to a ghost. The voice on the recording was digitally scrambled, a common countermeasure, but her software was peeling it back layer by layer. The subject was discussing a shipment, tungsten rods labeled as mining equipment leaving Busan for port in Myanmar. The client was a man known only as the Architect. Her supervisor leaned in. "What do you hear?" Anya didn't look up. "I hear a man from the Kansai region, probably Osaka, late 40s, educated, and he's not just a logistics guy, he's the one giving the orders." That was her gift. While others analyzed words, Anya analyzed music, the music of speech. Pitch, timbre, the slight elongation of vowels specific to Osaka, the subtle, controlled aggression of someone used to being obeyed without question. She filed her report. The Architect was a mid-to-upper-tier lieutenant in the Yamaguchi-gumi, the largest Yakuza syndicate in Japan, with a portfolio in illicit metals and arms trafficking. The case was flagged, then, like so many others, it vanished into the bureaucratic fog of a multinational task force. 6 weeks later, Anya resigned. The official reason was burnout. The real reason was a man named Karl Voss. He was a German national, a middleman they'd been tracking. Anya had provided a definitive voice ID that placed him at the center of a heroin pipeline. The order came down from a level she couldn't see. Stand down. Voss was an asset of another agency. Her work was buried. That night, she deleted her profiles, packed one bag, and used her savings to buy a ticket to Seoul, a city big enough to get lost in, with a thriving market for her specific skills. She became a ghost, too. In Seoul, Anya Petrova rebuilt a life from spare parts. She rented a one-room apartment in Itaewon, its window facing a brick wall. Her world shrank to the dimensions of her laptop and a high-fidelity microphone. She took translation jobs through an exclusive agency that asked no questions: legal depositions, corporate negotiations, technical manuals. The pay was good. The work was silent, and it kept her away from the world of intercepted voices. She told herself she was done. But the mind is its own archive. She couldn't delete the voices. The Architect's voice, calm, methodical, arranging violence like a chess game, would sometimes surface in her dreams. She'd wake up, heart pounding, and write down a phonetic nuance she remembered, the way he pronounced his R's, almost like a D, a tick, a fingerprint. Meanwhile, in Osaka, a different kind of reconstruction was underway. Kenji Sato, aged 48, was laundering his own history. He dissolved 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands and formed a new one, Sato Ventures. The brochure was impeccable. It spoke of strategic capital infusion for Asian tech startups, with a focus on logistics optimization software. His photo showed a man with sharp cheekbones, hair slicked back, wearing a Tom Ford suit. The silver tie pin was a modest flourish. It was also a asterisk Kamen asterisk, a family crest, but one so stylized only another member of his clan would recognize it. The Yamaguchi-gumi had pivoted. With police pressure mounting in Japan, the smart money was going legitimate, investing in the booming tech markets of Korea and Southeast Asia. They needed a frontman who looked the part, who could talk to bankers and CEOs without setting off alarms. Kenji was perfect. He had the bearing, the education, and a ruthless, analytical mind that had built trafficking networks across 8 countries. This was just a new kind of network. His mission in Seoul was simple: secure a $50 million investment from a consortium of Korean investors for a data security startup. The startup was real. Its chief technology officer was a brilliant kid from Tokyo who had no idea his primary investor was a Yakuza subsidiary. The money flow, once clean, would be siphoned, diverted, and washed through a dozen layers, eventually funding everything from methamphetamine production in Myanmar to political bribes in Manila. It was the perfect crime, happening in plain sight. The call came to Anya on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her agency contact was brief. High-stakes negotiation. Japanese venture capitalist, Korean investors, 2-day session. They need a Japanese-Korean interpreter with technical acuity. Pay is triple your usual rate. Anya almost said no. Corporate work was one thing. A high-stakes deal room felt too close to the world she'd left. But triple the rate meant 6 months of freedom. She could disappear again, maybe go to Uruguay. She said yes. She received a dossier. Primary client, Kenji Sato, CEO of Sato Ventures. The file contained his professional bio, a list of his board seats, and a note. Client emphasizes discretion and linguistic precision. He is a careful speaker. Anya scanned it. It was flawless, and that itself was a minor red flag. No messy edges, no failed ventures, just a smooth, upward trajectory. She memorized the technical jargon for data encryption and venture capital timelines. She didn't bother to look at his photo. The meeting was set for the 42nd floor of the Jongno Tower, in a conference room owned by one of Seoul's most prestigious law firms. Anya arrived 30 minutes early, wearing her uniform of power, a charcoal blazer, a cream shell, thin black glasses. She set up her equipment, tested the microphone, and aligned her dictionaries. The Korean investors filed in first, 5 men in impeccable suits, their demeanors a mix of curiosity and sharp appraisal. Then the door opened and Kenji Sato entered. He moved with a quiet, contained authority. He nodded to the investors, shook hands with a firm, single pump. He removed his overcoat, revealing the dark navy suit. He sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 large, silent associates who took seats against the wall, bodyguards. Anya noted it. Wealthy men often traveled with security. She adjusted her headset. Kenji Sato began to speak, offering polite greetings in accented Korean. Anya translated smoothly, her voice a neutral conduit. Then he switched to Japanese, laying out his opening proposition. The moment his first full sentence flowed through her headphones, Anya's blood turned to ice. Her hand, hovering over her notepad, froze. It wasn't the words. It was the music beneath them, the Osaka cadence, the specific, almost imperceptible gravel in the lower register. The way he hit a consonant and held it a millisecond too long, a sign of controlled impatience. It was a voice she had studied for 37 hours across 2 months, a voice that had discussed the market price for uranium. The architect was in the room, and he was looking directly at her, waiting for his words to be translated. Her mind split into 2 parallel tracks. One, the professional, continued to translate, her voice steady, betraying nothing. The other screamed. It calculated the odds. The coincidence was impossible. This was a targeted trap, or it was a catastrophic accident. The bodyguards, the sealed room, 50 floors up. She was alone. The first negotiation session proceeded for 3 hours. Anya worked mechanically, a brilliant autopilot. She recorded every word Sato spoke, not for the translation but for the archive in her mind. She matched each vocal signature to the scrambled recordings from Talon. By the midday break, she was certain. 100%. Kenji Sato was the architect. The Yakuza was not just investing in Korea. They were using her, a former intelligence analyst, as their unwitting translator to do it. The irony was a knife twist. During the break, she locked herself in a bathroom stall. Her hands shook. She could walk out, claim illness, vanish. But then the deal would proceed. $50 million would flow into the Yakuza's coffers, legitimizing them further. The CTO, the Korean investors, they were all marks in a con. She thought of Carl Voss, the asset they protected. The system was broken. It protected its own. Standing at the sink, splashing water on her face, she made a decision. She wouldn't run. She had a weapon they could never anticipate, the truth, spoken directly into his ear in the language of his crimes. She walked back into the conference room. The afternoon session began. The lead Korean investor pushed back on a clause about fund dispersal. Sato responded, his tone becoming firmer, the polite veneer thinning slightly. That's when Anya saw it, a flicker of the real man. A subtle shift in the vocal cords that she'd heard on tapes right before he issued a violent order. The investors were nodding, ready to concede. The deal was moments from being sealed. Kenji Sato leaned back, a faint, victorious smile on his lips. He looked at Anya, expecting the final translation of his terms. Instead, she took a slow breath, leaned into her microphone, and broke the world open. For 5 full seconds, there was no sound in the conference room except the low hum of the air conditioning. Kenji Sato did not move. The faint, victorious smile on his lips didn't fade. It simply fossilized. His eyes, locked on Anya's, underwent a terrifying transformation. The calculation of a businessman vanished, replaced by the flat, predatory assessment of a predator whose cover has been blown. Behind him, his 2 bodyguards shifted their weight forward, hands moving inside their jackets. The Korean investors stared, first at Anya, then at Sato, trying to parse a Japanese sentence they didn't understand but whose seismic impact was clear in the collapse of a man's face. Anya held Sato's gaze, her expression one of cold, analytical certainty. She had not accused, she had stated a fact, and the fact hung in the room like a guillotine blade. Sato broke the silence. He spoke in Japanese, his voice a low, controlled rasp. "You misunderstand." Anya translated, her voice still calm, but now she addressed the room, turning his defense into his indictment. "Mr. Sato says I misunderstand." Then she continued in Japanese directly to him. "No misunderstanding. The vocal fingerprint is exact. The scar tissue on your vocal cords from a childhood surgery is present in both samples. You are the architect. You brokered the tungsten shipment to Myanmar in April. You authorized the payment to the IRGC front company in Dubai." With each sentence, Sato's complexion turned a shade grayer. She was not guessing. She was reading from the secret ledger of his life. One of the investors, Mr. Park, the eldest, finally spoke. "What is she saying? What is this?" Anya switched to flawless Korean. "This man is not a venture capitalist. He is a high-ranking member of the Yamaguchi-gumi Yakuza syndicate. The company you are investing in is a money laundering front. I have verified this through voice analysis." Chaos erupted. Chairs scraped back. Mr. Park stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Sato. "Is this true?" Sato's control finally shattered. He slammed a fist on the table, a sharp, violent crack that made everyone jump. "This woman is a liar. She is trying to sabotage this deal." But his performance was broken. The investors saw not outrage, but panic. The bodyguards were now standing, their hands clearly resting on weapons. Anya knew the next move. They would detain her at best. At worst, the 42nd floor would become a tomb. She had planned for this. As Sato shouted, she reached under the table and pressed a single button on a device clipped to her belt. It was a dead man's switch, a signal broadcast to a prepaid phone in a locker at Seoul Station. The signal contained a compressed audio file, the last 30 seconds of the meeting, including her accusation and Sato's reaction. It also contained a set of coordinates and a message. "Release Package Alpha." Package Alpha was everything she had on the architect. Dossiers, voice prints, her original analysis from Talon. She had mailed a physical drive to a post office box in Berlin, registered to an investigative journalist, with instructions to publish if she missed a weekly check-in. The clock was now ticking for everyone in the room. Sato's head of security, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, barked an order in Japanese. "Secure the translator. No one leaves." The 2 guards moved toward Anya. The Korean investors protested, forming a confused, angry wall. In the commotion, Anya did something simple. She stood up, removed her translation headset, and placed it neatly on the table. Then she said in clear, loud English, "If I am detained, the information goes to Interpol, the National Intelligence Service of Korea, and the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. The signal is already sent." She looked at Sato. "Your operation is over. The only question is how many of your people you take down with you." Sato stared at her. He saw no bluff. He saw the cold precision of a professional who had already won. He raised a hand. The bodyguards froze. The room held its breath. Sato leaned back in his leather chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a terrifying, quiet resignation. He spoke to his men in Japanese. "Stand down." Then he looked at the horrified investors. "The meeting is concluded." But it wasn't over. Mr. Park was already on his phone, speaking in rapid, furious Korean to his lawyer. The other investors followed suit. The pristine deal was now a toxic scandal. Sato's eyes never left Anya. "Who are you?" he asked, this time in English. Anya picked up her briefcase. "I was your translator." She turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped her. The bodyguards looked to their boss for an order that didn't come. She stepped out into the plush hallway, the door swinging shut behind her, muffling the rising din of panic. She didn't run. She walked calmly to the elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every nerve screamed that a bullet would tear through the back of her blazer. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. The doors closed. Only then, as the numbers began to descend, did she let out a shaking breath. She had done it. She had blown the operation sky high. But as the elevator passed the 30th floor, a cold realization settled over her. She had just declared war on one of the most powerful criminal organizations on Earth, and they now knew her face. Down in the lobby, Anya moved like a ghost through the marble halls. She didn't exit through the main doors. She slipped into a service corridor, swapped her blazer for a hooded sweatshirt from her briefcase, and exited through a loading dock into a back alley. She had 3 safe locations pre-scouted. She went to the closest, a Love Motel in the Mapo district, the kind that rented rooms by the hour with total discretion. She paid in cash, under a fake name she'd used once before. The room was dark, smelling of cheap air freshener. She barricaded the door with a chair and finally let the tremors take over. The adrenaline crash was brutal. She replayed the last hour on a loop. Sato's face, the moment of collapse. Had she been too confident? What if the bodyguards had shot her anyway? What if Sato decided to burn his entire operation just to kill her? She checked the news on her laptop using a secure connection. Nothing yet. The scandal was still contained within the soundproof walls of the law firm. That was the most dangerous time. The time when a Yakuza lieutenant could still clean up a mess before it became public. She knew what the cleanup would involve, her. She waited for 6 hours, watching, listening. Then, at 9 p.m., the first ripple broke the surface. A short, cryptic item on a Korean financial news site. Major venture deal with Japanese firm Sato Ventures abruptly suspended. Sources cite unforeseen due diligence concerns. No further comment. It was the first domino. Anya allowed herself a thin, grim smile. The investors had acted fast to protect themselves. Their lawyers would be tearing apart Sato's paperwork and they would find the cracks. The Yakuza's front was sophisticated but not perfect, not under a forensic microscope. Then her burner phone vibrated. A single encrypted message from the Berlin journalist. Package received. Green light. Anya typed back. Hold, situation fluid, stand by. She wasn't ready to burn it all down, not yet. She needed Sato to feel the pressure to make a mistake. She needed him to run because a running man leaves a trail. Meanwhile, in a penthouse suite at the Shilla Hotel, Kenji Sato was in freefall. He had dismissed his bodyguards, a fatal loss of face, but he couldn't trust anyone. The woman, Petrova, was a ghost. His contacts in the Korean police found no record of her beyond her freelance visa. His contacts in the Yamaguchi-gumi's intelligence wing ran her name through their databases. Nothing. She was either incredibly good or backed by an entity even they couldn't see. He paced the room, his mind racing through the fallout. The Korean deal was dead. $50 million in clean capital gone. His superiors in Osaka would see this as catastrophic failure. In the Yakuza, failure was not an option, it was a disease. It required amputation. He had one card left to play. He placed a secure call to a number in Manila. A man named Javier answered. "The deal is compromised," Sato said, his voice hollow. "The translator was an intelligence plant. She exposed me in the meeting." There was a long silence on the line. Then Javier said, "And the woman, she vanished. She has evidence, voice prints. She mentioned the tungsten, the Dubai payment." Then she is not just a translator, she is an archivist. You have 24 hours to retrieve the archive and erase the archivist. If you cannot, the family will send a cleanup crew. You understand what that means? The line went dead. Sato understood. A cleanup crew would erase the problem and the problem's source, him. He was now on the clock, hunted by his own people. He had one day to find and silence Anya Petrova, or he would be silenced himself. The hunter had become the prey, and the walls of his gilded cage were closing in. He looked out at the glittering Seoul skyline, a city of 10 million people hiding one woman who had destroyed him with a single sentence. He had to find a needle in a metropolis, and he had to start with the one piece of her she left behind, her voice. Sato's first move was not to scour the streets. It was to go back to the source. He had a recording of the meeting. Every word spoken in that conference room, including Anya's lethal accusation, existed as a digital file on his lawyer's secure server. He isolated her voice, not the words but the raw audio signature. He sent it to a specialist in Tokyo, a former police acoustic analyst now on the Yamaguchi-Gumi payroll. The request was simple: tell me who she is, not her name. History. The analyst's report came back 3 hours later. The voice exhibited markers of formal linguistic training, likely Slavic or Baltic native language interference on certain Japanese phonemes. More telling were the acoustic patterns consistent with long-term headphone use and a specific barely there reverberation, the echo of a soundproof booth. The conclusion was chilling. Subject is a trained audio analyst, probable background in signals intelligence or forensic linguistics, not police. Deeper, Sato now knew he wasn't just hunting a translator, he was hunting a mirror image of himself, a professional who understood tradecraft. This changed the calculus. A professional would have dead drops, protocols, allies. Killing her outright would not contain the data. He needed to turn her, or he needed to access her network. He had one lead, the translation agency. They would have her file, her photo, her contact details. It was an obvious trap, but he had to spring it. He sent his most discreet operative, a Korean fixer with no direct ties to the syndicate, to the agency's offices with a story about a bonus payment for the translator from the aborted deal. The fixer returned 90 minutes later, empty-handed. The agency director, a nervous man in a too-tight suit, had been visited an hour earlier by 2 men from the Korean National Intelligence Service. They had confiscated Anya Petrova's entire file. The NIS was already involved. The scandal had leaked upward, from the corporate lawyers to the national security apparatus. Sato felt the ground dissolving beneath his feet. His operation was now a counterintelligence target. Anya, in her motel room, was also tracking the fallout. She monitored police bands, financial news, and dark web forums where Yakuza associates sometimes communicated in coded fragments. The silence from the official channels was deafening, which meant the NIS had imposed a media blackout. That was both good and bad. Good because it slowed Sato's ability to use public chaos to find her. Bad because it meant she was now a piece in a much larger, opaque game between states and syndicates. She knew her old life was gone. Her apartment would be watched. Her bank accounts would be flagged or frozen. She had cash, but not enough to run forever. She needed leverage. She opened Package Alpha on an air-gapped laptop. She began a deeper dive into the data she'd collected on the architect, looking for something she'd missed, a vulnerability beyond his voice. She found it buried in a financial trail. A shell company in Singapore, Orchid Holdings, showed a series of unusual quarterly payments to a private medical clinic in Zurich. The payments weren't for a person. They were for a project code-named Kintsugi. Using her old agency backdoors, which she knew would now alert her former employers, she took the risk. She queried the code name. The result made her blood run cold. Kintsugi was not a person. It was an algorithm. A next-generation money-laundering AI developed by a rogue cell within a Russian cybercrime group, designed to move and hide funds across crypto and traditional markets with near-perfect invisibility. Sato wasn't just laundering Yakuza money. He was beta testing a weapon for the highest bidder. The $50 million Korean deal was a live fire test. And the clients included not just the Yakuza, but likely a splinter group of the IRGC and a consortium of Eastern European oligarchs. She had stumbled out of a corporate confrontation and into the heart of a global financial warfare project. The stakes had just multiplied by a factor of 1,000. At that moment, her burner phone rang, a number she didn't recognize with a Berlin area code. It was the journalist, Lena. Her voice was tense. "Anya, your package is a nuclear bomb. I've verified parts of it with my sources. The Kintsugi algorithm is real, but you have a bigger problem. Your signal from the conference room was intercepted." Anya's stomach tightened. By who? By everyone. The NIS, obviously, but also a Japanese signals intelligence unit. And a private contractor registered in Cyprus that my source links to the same Russian group that built Kintsugi. They all have a fragment of the audio. They all know a woman named Anya Petrova blew the whistle, and they all want what's in your head. You're not just hiding from the Yakuza anymore. You're the most wanted intelligence asset in Asia, and you don't work for a single agency. Lena paused. There's an offer. From who? From the Americans. Man from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They want Kintsugi. They want Sato. They want you to come in and debrief. In exchange, witness protection, a new identity, the works. Anya laughed, a dry, hollow sound. And become their asset like Karl Voss. No thank you. It's that or you disappear for real. The Yakuza cleanup crew landed at Incheon Airport 2 hours ago. 4 men. They're here for Sato and for you. The line went dead. Anya sat in the dim motel light. She was at the center of a converging storm. The Yakuza wanted her dead. The Russians wanted their algorithm back. The Koreans and Japanese wanted to contain the scandal. The Americans wanted a trophy. And Kenji Sato was caught in the middle with her. She had one move left, a move born of sheer, desperate audacity. If everyone wanted a piece of her, she would give them a target they couldn't ignore. She would take Kintsugi public. Not through a journalist, but by turning the algorithm against its masters. She began to write code, using the access keys she'd extracted from Sato's financial flows. If she could trigger a flaw in the AI, cause it to momentarily expose the money trails it was designed to hide, it would create a financial earthquake. It would also paint the biggest target in the world on her back. But it was the only way to burn the whole system down. Kenji Sato was also making his last desperate play. Knowing the cleanup crew was in the city, knowing his time was measured in hours, he did the unthinkable. He reached out to the one person he thought might understand mutual annihilation, the Korean National Intelligence Service. Using a back channel through a corrupted former diplomat, he sent a message. "I am Kenji Sato, also known as the Architect. I wish to defect. I have full knowledge of Project Kintsugi, its backers, and its test runs. I will trade it all for political asylum and the elimination of the cleanup team sent for me." It was a Hail Mary pass. The NIS could easily take his information and hand him over to his own people as a goodwill gesture, but he was betting that Kintsugi was too valuable a prize. The message was sent. Then he waited in a safe house in Hongdae, a pistol on the table beside him, listening for the sound of footsteps on the stairs. He was no longer a lord of the Yakuza. He was a man bargaining with his last breath. Anya's fingers flew across the keyboard. She had isolated a core vulnerability in Kintsugi's laundering protocol, its need to periodically reconcile transactions across blockchains. By flooding it with a cascade of microtransactions from 1,000 fake wallets, she could force a logic fault, a glitch where the algorithm would, for about 90 seconds, publicly log its internal routing map before correcting itself. 90 seconds was enough. Enough for every financial intelligence unit on the planet to grab a snapshot. She initiated the attack sequence. Across the globe, in servers in Zurich, Singapore, and Moscow, alarms began to sound. In a conference room at NIS headquarters in Seoul, a young analyst watching crypto markets saw a bizarre bloom of data erupt on his screen. In a townhouse in Berlin, Lena's source called her, yelling, "Something happening with Kintsugi. It's leaking." And in the Hongdae safe house, Sato's phone buzzed with an alert from his own monitoring system. His life's work, the masterpiece of criminal innovation, was self-immolating. He knew in that instant who was doing it, Only one person had the keys and the skill, the translator, the archivist, the woman who had seen his ghost and decided to give it a body just to watch it burn. He stood up, picked up the pistol, and looked out the window. Down in the street, he saw two black sedans pull up silently. The doors opened. 4 men in dark jackets got out. The cleanup crew. They looked up at his window. At the same moment, from the other end of the street, 2 more unmarked vans screeched to a halt. Korean NIS agents in tactical gear spilled out, weapons drawn. The 2 groups faced each other on the quiet street, with Sato in the middle, a ghost caught between 2 worlds ready to collide. He had run out of time, out of moves, out of hope. The only thing left was the fallout. On the quiet street in Hongdae, time didn't freeze, it fractured. The 4 Yakuza cleaners saw the NIS agents. The NIS agents saw them. For one heartbeat, there was only the tense silence of 2 predators sizing each other up. Then a shout in Korean, "Armed suspects, stand down!" The cleaners went for their weapons. A storm of gunfire erupted, shattering the night. Up in the safe house, Kenji Sato heard the shots. He didn't flinch. He looked at the pistol in his hand, then placed it gently back on the table. The fight was over. He walked to the door and unlocked it. He sat down in a chair facing the entrance, hands on his knees, and waited. Downstairs, the firefight was brief and brutal. 2 cleaners fell. 1 NIS agent was hit in the leg. The remaining 2 cleaners tried to retreat but were cornered in an alley, disarmed and cuffed. The team leader, Agent Choi, took the stairs 2 at a time, his team behind him. They burst into the room, weapons raised, expecting a final stand. They found Sato sitting calmly, a man already in his own coffin. "Kenji Sato," Agent Choi said. "You are under detention by the National Intelligence Service." Sato nodded. "I wish to formally request asylum. I have information." "You'll have every opportunity to talk," Choi replied, his voice cold. As they led him out in handcuffs past the bodies of the men sent to kill him, Sato looked up at the Seoul sky. He was a prisoner. But he was, for the moment, alive. The architect of his own ruin had become a protected asset. The kintsugi algorithm bled for exactly 87 seconds. In that time, the flaw Anya engineered forced it to vomit its routing logs into a publicly accessible ledger. Financial intelligence agencies from Washington to Berlin to Tokyo captured the data. It was a Rosetta Stone for global dirty money. The logs revealed not just Sato's Yakuza networks, but the Iranian Revolutionary Guard core front companies, the Russian oligarch pipelines, and a dozen corrupt officials across Southeast Asia. The explosion was silent but seismic. Within an hour, Interpol issued 43 red notices. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned 19 entities and 31 individuals. In Tokyo, the police arrested 7 mid-level Yamaguchi-gumi officers on charges of financial crimes. Their arrests, based on data they couldn't comprehend, had come from their own secret weapon. The empire didn't just collapse. It was unmade from the inside out by its own masterpiece. And at the center of the hurricane, in her Mappo motel room, Anya watched the world react. News sites flashed with headlines about a global financial data breach, an unprecedented crime takedown. None of them mentioned her name. She had succeeded. She had burned it all down, and in doing so, she had erased her own leverage. She was now a loose end with nowhere to go. The knock on her door came at 4:17 in the morning. It wasn't a loud bang, but a firm, polite tap. Anya was awake, packed, ready. She had expected the NIS. She opened the door. 2 men stood there. One was Agent Choi. The other was an American in a rumpled suit, introduced as David Miller from FinCEN. They were alone, no tactical team. "Miss Petrova," Choi said, "may we come in?" She stepped aside. The room felt impossibly small with the 3 of them in it. Miller spoke first. "You have caused one hell of a mess, and you have done our jobs for us." He laid a tablet on the small table. On it was a live feed of an interrogation room. Kenji Sato, looking exhausted but coherent, was speaking to 2 NIS analysts, a stack of documents between them. "He's talking," Miller said. "A lot. He's giving us everything on Kintsugi, the Yakuza's international structure, everything. In exchange, he will serve a reduced sentence in a Korean prison, not a Japanese one. He will likely live." Anya felt a cold anger. "He gets to live," Choi nodded. "Justice is sometimes a transaction. His information will lead to hundreds of arrests, the disruption of billions in criminal funds. It is a good trade. He looked at her. You, however, are a problem. You are not an agent. You are a civilian who committed several cybercrimes, interfered in a national security investigation, and exposed state methods. The easy path is to charge you. Anya said nothing. Miller leaned forward. The other path is the one we're offering. You come with me. You debrief fully for 3 months. We build a new identity for you. You get a life somewhere quiet. In return, you never speak of this again. You vanish. It was the same offer Lena had relayed. Anya looked at the tablet, at Sato's face, a man who had orchestrated untold suffering, now bargaining for his life. She thought of Karl Voss, the asset they protected. The system always protected its useful monsters. But it also offered a cage to those who broke it. She could fight and likely lose everything, or she could accept the cage and survive. What about the investors, the ones in the room? Choi answered. They have been debriefed. They will not speak. The official story is that Sato Ventures failed due to irregularities discovered by internal auditors. There is no mention of a translator or the Yakuza. This never happened. Anya almost laughed. The most powerful moment of her life, the moment she found her voice, was being erased from the record. She looked at the two men. I want one condition. Miller raised an eyebrow. You're not really in a position to set conditions. I'm the only person who understands how I broke Kintsugi. I want to guarantee that the flaw I exploited is patched, but that a backdoor is built in. A way for allied financial crimes units to monitor it if it's ever rebuilt. I write the code. You implement it. No one else. Miller and Choi exchanged a long look. It was a small, technical request, but it was a thread of conscience woven into the machinery of the dark. Miller nodded. Agreed. 3 days later, Anya Petrova was gone. She walked out of the motel room with Miller into a waiting car and into the obscurity of a witness protection program. Her apartment was cleared. Her digital history was scrubbed. In the intelligence community, a quiet memo circulated. Asset neutralized, situation contained. In a prison outside Seoul, Kenji Sato began his new life as a data mine, traded piece by piece for years of his life. The Yamaguchi Gumi, reeling from the exposure, underwent a bloody internal power struggle, fracturing its global influence. The story of the translator who broke the Yakuza lord never made the news, but in the financial crime units of 3 continents, a legend began to circulate. They called it the Soul Sanction. The day a ghost in the machine turned on its masters and brought down a hidden empire with nothing but a microphone and a memory. They didn't know her name. They only knew her work. 1 year later, in a small coastal town in Portugal, a woman named Alara received a postcard. It was a picture of the Jongno Tower in Seoul. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a single line in Korean. The ghost is still singing. It was unsigned. Alara, formerly Anya, smiled. She walked to the edge of her garden overlooking the Atlantic and tore the postcard into small pieces, letting the wind carry them out to sea. She had her quiet life. She had her silence. But in a vault in Langley, Virginia, and in a server in Seoul, a piece of her code lay dormant, a sentinel inside the beast, waiting. She had traded her past for a future, her truth for a ghost story. But some voices, once heard, can never be fully silenced. They just learn to whisper in a different key. So what is the true story here? Is it about a criminal who was caught? Or is it about a system that only works when someone outside of it decides to break the rules? Anya Petrova was not a hero in the traditional sense. She was a fugitive, a hacker, a woman who took the law into her own hands because the official channels had failed. She saw a crack in the world, and instead of reporting it, she widened it until the whole structure collapsed. In the end, the official record erased her. The Yakuza lord became an asset. The algorithm was neutered and repurposed. A tidy, silent conclusion. But history is not written in the official records. It's written in the consequences. Because of one translator's decision in a Seoul conference room, a global money laundering operation was exposed. Dozens of criminal entities were sanctioned. A Yakuza syndicate was thrown into disarray, all because someone listened, truly listened, and then refused to stay silent. We live in a world of layers. The surface layer is what we're supposed to see: the businessman, the translator, the legal contract. Beneath it lies the real architecture of power, the hidden alliances, the silent transactions, the ghosts in the machine. And every so often, a person moves between those layers. They see the wiring behind the walls, and they face a choice, to play their assigned part or to rip the walls down. Anya ripped the walls down. She used her knowledge as a weapon, not for a country, but for a principle. Principle that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, that some voices once identified must be answered. Her story is a blueprint for how a single individual, armed with nothing but expertise and conviction, can dismantle an empire. It's a reminder that the most powerful person in the room is not always the one signing the checks. Sometimes it's the one holding the microphone, the one who decides what words mean and what truths get spoken into existence. Stay curious. Stay listening. And remember, the next world-changing revelation might not come from a spy or a soldier. It might come from the person in the chair next to you, translating